Welcome to another episode of 8 Digital Podcast. Thanks very much for all your feedback and comments on our last episodes. Please keep sharing your thoughts with us so we can keep bringing you thoughtful discussions and conversations on the issues that matter to you. Today, we are again going to discuss what we've been discussing all this week, that is, the Iran-Israel war. But this time, we are going to focus on Israel's nuclear program rather than Iran's, which is the focus of the current crisis and has been a target of scrutiny and sanctions by the U.S. and its allies. Isn't it an irony that the war that Israel launched against Iran is aimed at taking out its nuclear program? But at the same time, Israel has its own secretive nuclear weapons program, which doesn't seem to bother the same West and the U.S., who are very comfortable, apparently, dealing with Israel as the only nuclear power in the Middle East. We're going to try and explore Israel's unacknowledged nuclear capabilities and what that means for the region.
It's definitely a key topic, especially right now with all the tensions. Understanding the history and the strategy behind Israel's nuclear position, it really helps clarify what's happening in the region, why this sort of secret is so important.
Absolutely. And to get a handle on this, we really need to look back, right back to the beginning of Israel. My understanding is this push for a nuclear program wasn't slow or gradual. It happened almost right away after 1948. What was driving that urgency?
You're spot on. The urgency was, immense. If you look at the historical records, leaders like David Ben-Gurion, they saw a nuclear program as absolutely essential for survival. It wasn't just about military defense, it was deeper. It was about making sure the horrors of the Holocaust could never again happen to the Jewish people. Ernst David Bergman, who was the first chair of Israel's Atomic Energy Commission, he put it very bluntly. He said, "A bomb would ensure that we shall never again be led as lambs to the slaughter." That kind of deep fear, that determination, it really set the whole thing in motion.
So an existential need, basically. And Dimona became the heart of this effort, right? That facility they started building in '58, way out in the southern desert. How did a brand new country, presumably without huge resources, even start something like that?
Right, and that's where international help was absolutely key. It's something that doesn't always get talked about, how much assistance Israel actually received. France, for example, was a really important early partner. They invited Israeli scientists to their nuclear research center at Saclay way back in 1949. And later gave them access to French nuclear test results. Then you had the British and the Norwegians involved too. We know about 20 tons of heavy water, which is crucial for certain reactors shipped right to Israel in '59 and '60.
20 tons, that sounds like a lot.
It is. And there are even stories about yellow cake sales from Argentina between '63 and '66. Yellow cake being, the raw uranium concentrate you need to start making fuel. So this network, sometimes open, sometimes maybe less so, it was really vital to get the program, off the ground.
Okay, so not exactly a solo project then, but eventually the U.S. must have caught on. We know President Kennedy, specifically, put a lot of pressure on Israel in the early '60s. He wanted inspections at Dimona, didn't he? What happened there?
Oh, yeah, that was a real high-stakes battle of wills. A kind of diplomatic clash between Kennedy and Israel's prime ministers, Ben-Gurion and then Levi Eshkol. The documents show Israel was genuinely worried Kennedy might actually consider sending U.S. troops to Dimona if they didn't allow inspection.
Wow, really? Airborne troops?
That was the fear. So Israel eventually agreed to what they called regular visits, but, these were very carefully controlled, not the kind of strict open access Kennedy wanted initially. And interestingly, the reactor at Dimona actually went critical, started operating in mid-1963. That's when it could really start producing fissile material. This was despite Israel initially suggesting it would be much later. So that period really showed Israel was determined to go its own way on this.
And then, fast forward about 10 years. By 1973, Washington seems to have accepted the reality. They were convinced Israel had the bomb. And the fact Israel wasn't covered by the U.S. nuclear umbrella, that security guarantee experts saw that as sort of silent nod, acknowledging Israel had its own weapons, right?
Exactly. It basically cemented Israel's strategic thinking. It showed this deep belief that their ultimate security had to be in their own hands, and that they'd pursue whatever they felt was necessary to guarantee that security. That independent stance, forged back then, it still defines their position today.
Okay, so bring it to the present day. After decades of this sort of secret development, what are we actually looking at now? What kind of capability does Israel have?
Well, the consensus estimates from groups like the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation, the Nuclear Threat Initiative, they generally believe Israel has at least 90 warheads. Perhaps more importantly, they likely have enough fissile material, the core stuff, for the bombs to build potentially hundreds more. Now, that's a serious capability, but context is important. Among the 9 countries known to have nuclear weapons, Israel's stockpile is thought to be the second smallest. Only North Korea is believed to have fewer.
90 warheads, potentially hundreds more possible.
Yeah.
Still significant, even if smaller than others. How would they deliver them? Do they have the full triad land, air, and sea?
Yes, it appears they've developed a full triad, which gives them options and makes their deterrent more survivable. For land-based delivery, they have the Jericho series of ballistic missiles. The Jericho III, which came online around 2008, is pretty advanced.
What about the other legs, air and sea?
Right. For air delivery, they rely on their advanced fighter jets, like the F-15s and F-16s. These planes are understood to be able to carry nuclear-capable cruise missiles, like the Popeye Turbo, gives them flexibility. And then the sea-based element, which is crucial. They operate Dolphin-class submarines. 5 are operational now, with plans for 3 more.
Submarines too?
Yes, and these aren't just any subs. They're reportedly equipped with special torpedo tubes that can launch long-range cruise missiles, also nuclear-capable. We're talking ranges of maybe 1,500 to 2,400 kilometers for those missiles. This submarine capability is vital because it guarantees a second strike ability, meaning even if their land bases or airfields were hit first, they could still retaliate from the sea. That makes their deterrent much more credible.
And it's not static, is it? There's been talk about new activity at Dimona, satellite images showing construction over the last few years. Some say it's just repairs, modernization, but others think maybe they're building a new reactor, possibly to boost plutonium production. What would that mean?
Well, if that interpretation is right, it signals a continued long-term commitment. Not just maintaining what they have, but potentially boosting their ability to produce fissile material. That would fit with the strategy of ensuring they have a strong, perhaps expandable arsenal for the long haul. It definitely aligns with needing a powerful deterrent in, well, a very tough neighborhood. It sends a message, even without saying anything explicit.
This whole powerful yet unconfirmed capability relies on Israel's official policy. They call it deliberate ambiguity. Some call it opacity or even implausible deniability. What does that policy actually involve?
It's a very fine line they walk, diplomatically speaking. The official line is that Israel will not be the first country to introduce nuclear weapons to the Middle East. That word, introduce, is key. It's deliberately vague. Yitzhak Rabin, back when he was ambassador to the U.S. in '68, apparently told the State Department that introducing meant actually testing a weapon or deploying it openly or publicly announcing it. Crucially, it did not mean simply having them. So this lets them keep the deterrent effect without officially confirming the arsenal, which would trigger all sorts of political and strategic consequences. It keeps adversaries guessing, right?
But the ambiguity was seriously challenged by Mordecai Vanunu, wasn't it? The Dimona technician who leaked photos and details in 1986 to the Sunday Times. He even suggested they had thermonuclear weapons. What happened after that leak?
Vanunu's leak was a massive breach for Israel. The fallout for him was huge. He was abducted by Mossad in Italy, taken back to Israel, and got 18 years for treason and espionage. But his revelations, printed worldwide, were a major embarrassment for the government. It completely undermined that carefully constructed policy of ambiguity. Suddenly, everyone was talking about Israel's nuclear weapons in a way Israel had always tried to prevent.
And alongside this ambiguity, Israel also stays outside the main international treaty, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT. It's in a small group with India, Pakistan, North Korea, South Sudan. What's the significance of not signing the NPT?
That's a really big deal. If Israel signed the NPT, it would be legally required to give up any nuclear weapons it has. The treaty aims to stop the spread and work towards disarmament. Only 5 countries, the U.S., Russia, China, UK, France, are recognized as official nuclear weapon states under the treaty based on having tested before 1967. By staying outside the NPT, Israel avoids international inspections of its nuclear sites and keeps its program secret. It doesn't face the legal constraints of the treaty. It highlights their focus on independent security, but yeah, it does cause friction with the global non-proliferation goals.
Okay, so that brings us to how this fits into their overall strategy. Israel's situation is unique small country, not much strategic depth, relying heavily on reservists. How does the nuclear piece fit in?
It leads to this concept known as the Samson option. Basically, it refers to the idea that Israel could, as an absolute last resort, use nuclear weapons if it faced an existential military threat. If the country itself was about to be destroyed, it's that never again idea coming back again, a promise of massive retaliation to prevent annihilation. It's meant to deter anyone from even thinking about trying to wipe Israel off the map.
So it's about deterring attacks on Israel itself, but they also take a very active stance against other countries in the region trying to get nuclear weapons.
Oh, absolutely. That's the Begin Doctrine, named after Prime Minister Menachem Begin. It basically says Israel has the right to use preemptive military strikes to stop other regional powers from getting nuclear weapons, and they've acted on it. Operation Opera in 1981, taking out Iraq's Osirak reactor, is the classic example. Then in 2007, Operation Orchard hit a site in Syria suspected of being a nuclear reactor. And it's not just bombs. Think about the Stuxnet computer worm in 2010, widely believed to be a joint U.S.-Israeli effort that messed up Iran's centrifuges. Plus, there's persistent speculation, strong beliefs really, that Israel has been involved in assassinating Iranian nuclear scientists. It's a very proactive, some would say aggressive, counterproliferation strategy. They simply won't accept a nuclear-armed neighbor.
Which leads back to the central question, maybe the paradox. Why, given Israel's own program and these actions against others, do some Western powers, especially the U.S., seem okay with Israel having these weapons while reacting so strongly to Iran's program? It seems like a double standard to many.
It is the central paradox, you're right. From the viewpoint of key allies like the U.S., Israel's program is often perceived differently. It's seen, perhaps, as a stable deterrent held by a responsible actor, and not posing a proliferation risk, meaning they don't think Israel would sell or give away the technology. The understanding, maybe unspoken, is that it's purely for self-defense. But of course, that view really clashes with the whole idea of non-proliferation and the goal of Middle East free of nuclear weapons.
And this connects directly to the current conflict with Iran, the very irony we started with. Israel is actively working against Iran's nuclear ambitions while possessing its own secret arsenal. How does this reality affect efforts to stop the spread of nuclear weapons in the Middle East more broadly?
Well, it makes things incredibly difficult. Israel's policy of ambiguity, while serving its security goals, is seen by many as a major roadblock. Groups like the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation say this lack of clarity is a key obstacle to creating a WMD-free zone in the Middle East. I mean, it's hard to persuade other countries not to pursue these weapons when one country in the region clearly has them, keeps them secret, and faces relatively few international consequences for it. It just creates this fundamental imbalance.
So what are the potential outcomes of Israel's current actions against Iran? Could hitting your facilities actually backfire? Could it push Iran closer to getting a weapon rather than stopping them?
That is a huge concern for many experts. The worry is that these attacks, instead of deterring Iran, might actually strengthen the arguments of those within Iran who believe they need a nuclear weapon for their own security. It could reinforce their sense of vulnerability and make them double down on the program, perhaps secretly, perhaps more quickly. It's a scenario that could put the whole region on a very dangerous path, potentially sparking an arms race rather than preventing one. It shows how complex deterrence can be.
It really leaves us with a critical question to think about. What does Israel's unacknowledged but widely accepted nuclear status really mean for the future stability of the Middle East? Especially when tensions are so high, and when other countries trying to develop similar capabilities face such drastically different reactions from the world. It's something that fundamentally shapes the region's future. So this is it for today. The situation is rapidly evolving, and we will try to keep you updated. Please subscribe our YouTube channel and follow us on social media. Our handle is 8digitalco. And please do let us know in the comments, what did you like in today's discussion and what you didn't, and what you would like us to explore next. See you in the next podcast. Keep listening.